Welcome back to the Dave Experience. This is the scuba diving incident. Living in South Korea, I went down to Jeju or Jeju-do Island, and while I was there, I got my scuba diving license. The incident that occurred one day was when I was setting up my own equipment, and my tank was just 10 bars low. No big deal. I went to my instructor and he said it was fine. And then I tested my regulator and I clogged the tube, but it didn't stop venting air. I was smacking it. Finally, I went to my instructor who smacked it around and finally got the button to click back out. So I had lost another 15 bars of air. I showed the instructor. He said it was fine. I continued the procedure. And we dove down to about 25.5 meters. That had been my lowest dive at that time. The guy that had been translating for me wasn't there that day, so I didn't learn about nitrogen narcosis or the dive tables. I got down there and I'm doing sideways somersaults, I'm swimming in circles, I'm just having a great time because I'm a little drunk from the nitrogen. Suddenly, there's a huge number of bubbles coming up from underneath me, and I said, okay, someone's under me. So I look down, and there's no one under me. I'm looking around, trying to figure out where the bubbles could be coming from, because they're not coming, I can see the bottom, and they're not coming from there. Suddenly I realize they're coming from me. And having been down there a while, I was less than 50 bars of air left, and at that point, you start to feel out of breath. You start to feel like you're sucking the air out of the tank, which is perfectly normal because there's not a lot of pressure left in the tank. It's not pushing it out. You are almost sucking the air out of the tank, but nobody had told me that. So now I've got all these air bubbles coming up, and I look at my gauge, and my gauge is bouncing rapidly between 0 and 20 bars. Now I'm swimming after my instructor, but my instructor is much stronger than me, and I can't catch up with him, and he's pulling ahead. I shouted, because underwater sound travels a little bit differently. If you make the slightest sound, something that if the guy's not too far away, he'll hear you. Like if you were just on the surface and they wouldn't be able to hear you, underwater they'll hear you. So I shouted, but he was too far away and he didn't hear me. I looked around to try to find somebody else that I could breathe off their regulator, and I didn't know how much longer I was going to last. So I made an executive emergency decision to abandon my buddy and return to the surface. That was a heck of a trip. I'm going up to the surface. I tried to hold my breath, but I just couldn't. I was starving for air. I had to keep sucking the air out of the tank. Now, I didn't know about nitrogen decompression, and I'd suffered no ill effects, thank God, but I did know I wasn't supposed to rise faster than the bubbles, and I was. So I had to slow myself down, the whole time thinking my last breath was already past. Finally, I got to the surface, and I inflated my vest, and fought my way over to the rocks. I had to walk through 3 other scuba diving camps to get back to my own. And I waited, and about 5-10 minutes later, the instructor surfaced and saw me, and he was pissed. He was, he was worried, he didn't have enough air to keep searching, and he had to leave, he didn't know where I had gone to. So he came back to the surface, and he started yelling at me for about 5 minutes, and I couldn't understand a word of it, but I just kept nodding. And then finally, when he slowed down a little bit, one of the guys came to translate for me, and I explained everything. I explained there had been bubbles. I explained I couldn't find the fault. I explained that my gauge read 0. I explained that, I tried to catch up to him, I tried to get his attention, I couldn't, and I had no choice but to abandon the group and get out of there. And when he heard that, he understood and he said, okay, you acted correctly. And then he asked me where I surfaced, and I showed him, and that's where we had been underwater. And then he was just like totally cool after that. I was more upset about it than he was. That was my first thought when I came to the surface and I wasn't in danger of dying, was my instructor is going to be pissed. But I was more upset. He actually had to come and reassure me. He's like, look, you did the right thing. It's okay. I was a little freaked out, but you're, you acted correctly. You're still going to get your license. Don't worry about it. But what had happened was the other regulator had opened, and because of the nitrogen narcosis, I was a little drunk and inexperienced, so it didn't occur to me to check the other regulator for a leak. And strangely enough, my gauge read 25, not 20, not between 20 and 0, but with the air flowing out, I guess it's a little less accurate. But I got an opportunity to face death where I wasn't actually in any immediate danger. I mean, another minute or two with the air flowing out, I would have been, but I got to face death, and I faced it calmly and rationally, and I took the correct action. And that was actually a highlight of the trip for me. If when I dive from now on, I never dive alone. And if I could purchase one of those 1 minute emergency tanks, I'm going to do that too. It's a lot of fun underwater, but it's called an extreme sport for a reason.